Welcome back to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. We're pleased to welcome investment industry veteran Bob McLalan, whose exploits as a broker during the dot-com boom are legion. Bob, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
Bob, I asked you on the show because I thought you'd make a great pairing with our earlier guest. Mid-career tech entrepreneurs pretty much followed the golden path to success. Now, like me, you're at the tail end of your career, and like Sean, you grew up poor, but I take it you weren't the best student in the world when you started your journey.
So we're going to start at the top of my career, right? No, I wasn't. My grade average was just generally around a 1.5 GPA when I graduated.
In high school?
In high school, right. And I passed algebra with 3 Fs and a D because the math teacher told me he was the only math teacher in the school and didn't want me back. But I think the summary statement of my education in high school was by my journalism teacher. Upon when she decided to kick me out, she had me stand up in the center of the class, and she said, you know, McLalan, you're the kind of kid that's either going to grow up to be a president of a large corporation or a lifer in a state penitentiary, and I don't know which of those two you're destined to be, but you will not be doing it in my class. Get out.
And a lot of the friends you grew up with ended up the latter?
Most of my friends either went on to career criminals. We were transitioning from being punks at that time to being hardcore hoodlums. I think of the 5 friends of mine, 2 committed suicide, 1's a drug addict, 1 died of cancer. Of the 6, only 3 of us graduated from high school, and 1 of those 3 killed himself at 24.
Oh, boy.
And so I was trapped kind of in this situation because in that type of a situation, aspirations or the desire to make more out of yourself is simply a way of telling them, I'm better than you. And so you don't go to school when you get out. When you're with that kind of a crowd, you don't want to make yourself better.
No.
There's a trap, and I could see that ceiling was right on me.
But like many young men, the Marines saved you.
Well, yes, they did. I mean, the Marine Corps was my ticket out. It was the only thing I could do. I needed to get someplace where, you know, I would be gone for a number of years, and hopefully I would not return back up to Portland. I just had to make a trip out, and that was one way. And if I was going to have any future at all, and I had a sense of one at that time, I just felt that where I was in too much conflict. I was in conflict with my parents, conflict with the school, conflict with the police, conflict with rules. It just seems I was constantly in conflict. And the Marine Corps was this ticket. Here, take this ticket, and if you end up in Vietnam, hopefully you'll come back fine, and you can get discharged and get the GI Bill. And that seemed like a pretty simple decision to me.
And, of course, you grow up under the shadow of your father, who was not only a Marine, but a bona fide war hero.
Well, he wasn't a hero in a sense that, you know, it's an amusing story. But when I was a kid, I met a kid whose father, when we lived at Camp Hamilton, his father got a Silver Star at Iwo Jima, and I came home and I asked my father, you know, he was at Guadalcanal and then in Korea twice, and I said to him, gee, you know, did you get any medals? And were you a hero? Did you get any medals? And he sat me down, and I can remember this, and he said to me, no. He says, no, I didn't get any. He said, you know, when I was overseas, he said, when everybody else was smoking and writing letters and cleaning their rifles, I was sharpening my entrenching tool. And he says, when the first shell went off, he says, I was 6 feet under the ground. He says, my nickname was Gopher Mac. He says, and that's how you got here. I came home alive, and that's why you're here. And he said, that's the most important thing, the outcome of the war, the most important thing is you come home. So it was joking and stuff, but he certainly saw a lot of battle. I mean, he was 5 months at Guadalcanal,
right,
and then up in Korea. And so he certainly saw quite a bit. But he always would make this point of not glamorizing it with heroes and things. You can't pull like I'd watch a war movie, and you'd see a guy pull a grenade pin with his teeth, and he'd point out that it takes 30 pounds of pressure to pull a cotter pin out of a grenade. You'd see guys cradle water-cooled 50 caliber machine guns. I mean, my God, the tripod weighs 90 pounds. So he'd sit there, and he never glamorized it. It was his job. That was his career. It was his life. It was his job. And he kind of, in many ways, demystified the whole thing.
You didn't have a lot of mystery in your life. You mustered out of the Marines, and then what?
When I got out of the Marine Corps, I wanted to go to college. I mean, the idea was go in the Marines. I'd end up at Camp Hamilton, and I would get discharged from Camp Hamilton, which is exactly what happened. And the state of California recognized me as a resident, which meant I could go to the state colleges for free. And the GI Bill wasn't much, but it was $130 a month, and I had that. So when I got out of Camp Hamilton, I came up here, and I went to Foothill College. I lived in Mountain View. And I went to Foothill College. Then I worked my way through school. I had worked in the bar and restaurant business at night, I went to school during the day.
And how the heck did you get into Berkeley?
Well, it was hard work. California has a program. If you reach a certain level of achievement academically, you can transfer into any of the schools. Berkeley's a little bit more particular. They don't have a blank contract with any like Santa Barbara does. But I had the requirements. I took the courses. They said, here are the classes you need to take for this major, and here's the GPA you need to have. And if you got this, you can get in here. And I transferred in.
And you fell in love with literature and the classics.
Well, yeah, I did. I just really a great story. I mean, not that people really think literature is very exciting, but, I was at Stanford when Nixon went into Cambodia, and, of course, they had all these riots and demonstrations. It was a very exciting time. It was the most fun I'd had since I got out of the Marine Corps. And we're over at Stanford, and the hundreds of police show up in buses, and tear gas canisters going off. We're all running around through the mist of the gas, and people throwing rocks, and it was just a lot of fun. And so then at Kent State, and bang, there it was again. And I came back that night about midnight, and I realized I had a short story I had to read for an English class, and I hadn't done any work since the quarter started because of all of the anti-war activities. And I sat down at midnight, and I read this story by E.M. Forster called The Celestial Omnibus. And at 3:30, I had read it 3 times. And the next morning at 9 a.m., I took the seat right in front of the podium. And when the professor finished the class, I was on him all the way, talking to him about the story. And I think just to get rid of me, he just gave me some books and said, here, well, if you want to read that, then you should read this. And he gave me a bunch of books out of his office, and I read the books. The schools were closed on strike, and I found out where he lived, and I knocked on his door. And he opened the door, and I said, here's your books back.
And he became your lifelong mentor.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was like My Fair Lady. Yeah, it was Pygmalion. I mean, he taught me literature and history and art. I mean, I just spent hours with him, and he was my greatest advocate. I took 5 classes from him, from the Greeks on up. It wasn't really grooming for an English major. It was looking more for a comparative literature major. And we're friends today. I mean, he's 87.
But oddly enough, the big turn in your life came waiting table.
Well, yeah, that's not as exciting the way you say it as it happened. But, right, I was in graduate school. I was working for a master's in comparative literature, and I was working as a waiter on Montgomery Street in the financial district across the street from the Pyramid. I was working split shifts. I had the red jacket, the black bow tie, the white shirt. I had spaghetti on my shoes and salad dressing on my cuff, and I'm out there picking up change off plastic trays. And so, because I was the only guy that was young and single, these are all these old Italians in this place, they gave me all the girls. So whenever the girls would come in, I was only like 27, 28, so when any of the girls would come in for lunch or dinner, they always put them in Bobby's station. So Bobby had this table of six girls who worked in the financial district upstairs, and boy, it was a nice-looking crew. And I was single, and I lived in the city, and so I was, entertaining and talking, and they were laughing, and we were really having a good time, and I'm just kind of checking out, what's potential here, And I see this guy wave at me, and I walk over to this table in another station, and there's 2 guys, maybe a couple of years older than I was, nice suits, monogrammed cuffs, Dunhill lighter on the table. The cologne was like fragrant of money, success, and I said, can I help you, sir? And he's got a big smile on his face, and he hands me his card. And he said, you got a great line of BS. He said, have you ever thought about being a stockbroker?
Just like that.
Just like that, yeah. And I said, a stockbroker? I said, Christ, I've never had a savings account. So he gave me his card, and he said, I want my boss to meet you. I want you to give me a call.
Wow.
And, in the bar business, people make lots of offers and this and that, and you just let it go in one ear and out the other. But I kept the card, and after a few weeks, I called him up, and sure enough, he said, come on over. And I went over to the Pyramid and went upstairs and was introduced to the manager. And ironically, his office looked directly down on the restaurant that I was going to return to when the interview was over for the evening shift. It was quite a contrast to being here in his office in this suit and looking at the restaurant, the roof of the restaurant where I worked.
And how'd the interview go?
The interview went really well. I mean, it didn't go off real well. He picked apart my academics and talked about high school, and I was trying to dodge. I was ducking and weaving. Believe me, I felt like a boxer out there. He did not think that I was the type of person they were looking for. Too aggressive, really untraditional path, coming in, too old, 27, 28. They like him bang right out of college. I didn't have quite the look. I didn't have quite the demeanor. So his questions were really designed to dismiss me, to exclude me, or to, get rid of me. So he started nailing on the fact that I had no professional sales training before. And I said, well, what do you mean? I've done sales before. And he goes, no, I mean professional, where you learn how prospecting and qualifying and closing. And I said, I do that all the time. You kidding me? And he goes, you do what? I said, prospect, qualify, and close. I said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, I don't know about you, but I'm single, and I live over in the marina, and I work over there, and I live over there. And I said, it's for single people.
Yeah.
So I go out every night, and I'm looking at the girls. And I said, you take the average guy, he goes out, and he may talk to one or two girls, and they'll turn him down, and he goes home. I said, but me, I'm moving. I'm moving through the crowd. It's a chat here, a line there, a smile here, a joke here. And I'm looking for a woman who can make a decision to stay over.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so when you meet a lot of women, if you meet a girl, she's with 3 of her friends from Hayward, that's a bad prospect. If you meet a girl who comes into the city from Sausalito with a girlfriend, but the girlfriend owns the car, and I don't own a car, what am I going to do with her? How can she stay?
Mm-hmm.
So you just keep kind of looking around like that, and you're looking for the one who'll make the decision. And then when you find one, you ask her to go to the bar next door. And he was looking at me, and he had this smile on his face, and he was fingering his wedding ring. I remember that. I could tell he was kind of engaged. I also could tell he had no experience with any of this. And I said to him, you know why that's really important? To get her to go next door to have a drink? And he says, no, why? I says, because if she's not going to go next door to have a drink with you, she's not going to go down to your apartment to have one. And he said, you're a really interesting guy. So the interview turned on that point. And at the end of it, I said to him, how do you think I would do? And he took off his gold wire rimmed glasses in his little pinstripe 3-piece suit, the little gold chain across the front. And he put the glasses on the desk, and he leaned forward with this kind of thin-lipped little smile. And he said, I think you'd be phenomenal. I don't think you have any idea how successful you could be in this business. He introduced me to the manager in Palo Alto, who, much to my good fortune, was a former Marine. And he knew my dad was a Marine, and I was a Marine. And at the end of the interview, he said I was in the Marines too. And I'd rather have a guy I got to hold back than a guy I got to motivate. When can you be here? And that's how I got in.
So, Bob, here you are, a stockbroker. How'd you do?
Well, I did very well. He was absolutely right. It was a perfect business for me. I think being an English major really made me a communications expert rather than anything else. Mm-hmm. I wasn't an econ major. I wasn't an analyst. I could read large books of hardly interesting material, and I could communicate it to people in a way that was relevant and understandable to them.
Translate.
I think that's the thing I do better than anything else in my life. And so my career took off, and I ended up in the city with an investment bank up there. I was a managing director. I had a partner. We had a huge business. I had a private office with a balcony looking over the Golden Gate Bridge in Alcatraz. And I had a seat on the days outside, and we were the largest producers in the office. And then one day, I came into work, and we got an allocation. There was an IPO teed up to go called Netscape. And this firm that I work for was very much involved in the technology venture capital world. Mm-hmm. And technology had been their forte. And we got a big slug in Netscape. And Netscape, I don't know, I think rose from, they doubled the price from 14 to 28. Stock got up to about 76, closed, I think, around $56, $58. And well, we were off and running. We had a large discretionary portfolio. We didn't have to call clients up. They gave us discretion, and we just traded into those deals.
And the dot-com boom was on.
Oh, the dot-com boom was just the deal flow. I mean, looking at the syndicate calendar, what was lined up, I mean, they were all either in the infrastructure business or they were in the website. Mm-hmm. You can buy dog food online. I mean, it was just a whole variety of different types of companies that were in the buildup of the internet. And the wealth was phenomenal. I mean, I had a client that was 35 years of age. I mean, so it was $369 million.
Wow,
it was a crazy I went down time. To see her. My specialty was working banking clients and getting them to diversify their assets and how to hedge and set up selling schedules on large holdings, concentrated positions. But nobody would sell. That was the thing. Nobody wanted to sell. If I'm worth $369 million, I could be worth $500 million, and nobody wanted to sell a share because nobody wanted to miss anything.
Everybody drank the Kool-Aid.
Everybody drank Kool-Aid. Nobody wanted to leave the party early. And so, it was tough because what I found is the way to capture the business was to let them borrow on it. The firm allowed them, we would loan on restricted stock. So you got $100 million and you just deposit that stock with me, and then we'll set up a loan and we'll loan you money on that stock, and it's interest only, no minimum payments. You get to keep all the stock. We're giving you the leverage. Go buy your jet.
Yeah, and live large on that money.
That's what they were doing. Just borrowing and borrowing and borrowing on these large concentrated positions, completely unwilling to sell.
But it wasn't just your firm. It was everybody.
Yeah, it was everybody. It was more concentrated in my firm because, we were a leading underwriter of these technology stocks. And then, of course, we had a bank from Boston come out and buy us. And, of course, then that gave the firm more capital. And they came in, and it was just carte blanche. If you needed money, we would loan it to you. I had a client that had $300 million, and he had a $40 million loan. Not one thing did he buy that was liquid. Everything was art, properties, investments, venture capital funds, cars, all that stuff, mansions. Had a place in Florida, New York, all around.
The money was raining from the sky. I remember giving a talk at a bankers conference, and the guy came up to me afterwards and said, "You just made a killing on yesterday's IPO." And I go, "What are you talking about? I didn't buy into it." And he goes, "Yes, you did." And I walk out with $50,000 worth of stock. It was an amazing time.
Yeah, it was crazy. And our business just accelerated because we were important to the firm. And you have to understand that when the firms would do these IPOs, most of the stock could get DVP'd out someplace else, and it would be sold over somebody else's desk. And the institutional accounts would come back to us, say, "Okay, I want to fill up my position." We didn't have stock on the desk. By giving us stock, the stock stayed in house. These were retail people. These weren't hedge funds. So that when we did the stock, we put it into these accounts, and it stayed there. So the desk was always coming back to us and say, "I need 50, I need 100,000, I need 100,000 shares. What do you sell it for?" And they'd work the spread, and they'd give us a little kick on their side. And so we were just constantly, taking the stock off the syndicate desk and trading it back and forth over our trading desk so they could fill the demand for orders. And so we had a very unique franchise that way. We controlled the assets, and we kept the assets in-house, and we provided additional supply for the trading desk to feed the institutional accounts. And so our allocations started to be on a 2 million share deal, 2.5 million share deal, we get 100,000 shares or more of the deal. Right. And the thing would go up in some cases sixfold in a single day.
And the weird thing about it is the internet was being built during that time. There were some good companies that were coming along. There was a lot of infrastructure that was being put in the ground, but man, there was a lot of froth.
Well, there was a lot of fraud. I mean, I think revenue recognition was the new math, and nobody cared about earnings. Everything was about revenue. So if you had an internet company that wasn't growing fast enough, you do a secondary. You go out and if they got $100 million on the first round, you go out and give them a secondary, give them $300 million, and they go out and they buy other companies. Yep. And then they consolidate all the balance sheet, right, and the income statement. And they twerk, I guess is the appropriate word for it. They twerk the numbers, and all of a sudden you've got this revenue growth that looks like a ladder. And just goes straight up.
And there was some pretty loose accounting in those days.
Very much so. And actually, many of the clients that we dealt with, the papers were full of them, were serving time in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting to see people with the education and the pedigree and the technology backgrounds in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, these aren't the typical. I knew criminals. I've been to the state penitentiary visiting a friend from high school.
Yeah, you don't want to be there.
I know what it looks like. It's these people that we're sending to jail through the internet don't look like these people. They don't act like them. They don't have that background, but there they are. Fraud, accounting, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. When did you know the bust was coming?
Well, nobody said. See, that's the trap. Is that everybody's I'm going to hold and I'll sell at the top, and nobody really knows what the top looked like. I started to try to move a lot of money when the NASDAQ first started coming back down, when it went from 900 in June of 95 to 5234 5 years later. And so as it was coming back down, just a small 37% drop, I thought, whoa, we got to start moving. But my partner had very different ideas about stocks that we got for $15, sold for $160. He was buying back at $300. He became an investor rather than just take the money and run.
Yep.
And things just really started to unravel very quickly. Margin calls coming in. The guy with the $40 million loan, counting problems. Guys went to jail. Stock was worth a quarter, so the firm had $500,000 in equity on a $40 million loan. That's a problem.
It's a real problem across the board.
Yeah, it's a real problem across the board. And so everybody's trying to put on the brakes, and the NASDAQ's coming down the other side of the roller coaster peak. It's just hurtling right down to space, and that's how fast it was, because in 3 years it reversed 92%.
What were you going through at this time? I can imagine the commission flow started dropping off pretty rapidly.
Well, it did, actually, when the whole bust came, when the NASDAQ after 9/11 then hit 1100, Bill and I, we'd had probably $2 billion plus in assets, and we were doing about $13.6 million at the peak of our career as retail brokers.
Wow.
And everything started to unravel, and we sold the business to another firm, and we got over there, and it was unraveling so quick because we were so heavily concentrated in technology. It affected us. And then pretty soon, Christ, I was paying my ex-wife more money in alimony than I was earning.
I know how that feels.
I had remarried by then, and I had babies on the way. I'm 53 years of age, watching my wife give birth.
Yep.
Ushered in a whole new scene in my life.
So, Bob, it's been a dozen years since we all hit bottom. Looking back, what did it all mean, and where are you today?
I asked myself that question. My life was just pretty much a life in contrast, and I think it came down to two things, just to harken back to literature. I mean, literature is a way of interpreting the world, and that's what it did for me. It gave me an education and gave me a way of looking at the world and understanding it. When I left to join the Marines, it was Robert Frost Road not taken. Somewhere ages hence, I'll be telling this with a sigh. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that's always been my style. I want to go down the road that's less traveled by. And I think the thing that propels me through life is the opening of The Taming of the Shrew. When Petruchio comes into town, they say, "Oh, hail Petruchio, what winds blow thee to Padua?" And he says, "Such winds that scatter young men through the world to seek their fortune farther from home, where small experience grows." And those continue to be the two most important philosophical points I have in my life. And Christ, I'm having children at 53 years of age. I took another risk. It took me in another direction, a direction I didn't anticipate, one I couldn't plan for. Those two passages, I read those in my early 20s, and when I read them, I recognized them for what they were. That's me. That's me.
So, Bob, you take a real philosophical view of what was a tremendous roller coaster ride, and it was such a pleasure meeting you a little while ago, and appreciate you coming on the show and joining us. What's ahead?
What's ahead? Oh, it's just more of the same. I've got 13 and 16-year-old boys in school, and I don't see any reason to retire. I write. I'm doing other things, but 67. I mean, life's not over for me. I have children and a family.
Life is good.
Life is good. Oh, yeah. No, life is good. Yeah, it's different. It's always different, but then that makes it exciting. I mean, I don't want to lead an uninteresting life. I didn't want to be boring.
Bob, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
That was investment industry veteran Bob McLalan here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. Real Clear Radio Hour is produced in conjunction with Real Clear Politics, America's premier independent political website. Real Clear Radio Hour is a not-for-profit, donor-supported program, now broadcast in 11 cities and online. If you'd like to help us expand, please stop by our realclearradio.org and hit the donate button, or contact us to become a corporate supporter. And to make sure you don't miss any of our shows, sign up for updates on realclearradio.org, where you can also find a growing archive of over 175 interviews with guests like venture capitalist Peter Thiel, Russian dissident and former chess champion Garry Kasparov, Gibson Guitar CEO Henry Juskowitz, futurist George Gilder, education entrepreneur Sal Khan, renowned chef and restaurant entrepreneur Danielle Boulud, former director of the CIA and NSA General Michael Hayden, and even Ralph Nader and Robert Reich. That wraps up our show for this week. Please join us next week, same time, same station. See you then.